So I'm going to be pedantic and equivocate a bit on what constitutes a popular film.
I was gonna say that like literally just now, and I was gonna say you can interpret this however you want. No, like do it. Yo, what's up? Welcome to Owls at Dawn.
Who?
We are just two dudes from Southern California who studied philosophy, politics, and religion around the world and decided to start a podcast where we could bullshit it with impunity, and we should probably never try to be punny ever again. I'm Austin Hayden Smith.
And I'm Troy Polidori. That's who.
Yeah. And this is it, man. This is the end of the year, end of the decade wrap-up show. Are you ready, man?
Yeah, man. We've been going for like, what, almost half the decade? A little more than a third?
Wow. Yeah.
Pretty crazy, right?
I remember where we were when we started this podcast. I remember where I recorded the first episode. I recorded it in my aunt's bathroom when I was living temporarily. Wait, I don't remember. Was I back for summer? I was living in her house temporarily while I was like in transit. And I remember doing the first episode from within her bathroom with like a little shitty ass microphone.
I remember you doing an episode from like a Starbucks or a coffee shop, and there were people talking the whole time. I was like, dude, what the fuck?
Bro, I did an episode in a hostel, in the bar of a hostel in Dublin, Ireland. Do you remember that?
That was awful. That was so awful.
Oh my gosh. Yeah, we did some weird shit, man. But anyway, this episode is going to be us asking questions, kind of prepared questions about the past decade to one another. So from the kind of more serious and philosophical to the athletically and hobby-based stuff as well, I'm sure. So we'll definitely get into that. But I do want to say before we get into this that we actually have a new sponsor running for a little while. You all know, if you've been listening, that I have a new obsession. And my new obsession is swimming. So we have actually gotten a sponsorship from a really awesome swim company. They're called Engine Swim. And it's crazy because normally they just sponsor like professional athletes. It's the director of the company is a guy by the name of Andrew Lauterstein, who's an Australian Olympian. And they're a badass company. All their gear is like Troy was looking through the website, and what did they call it? Like high performance gear?
Yeah, performance suits, man.
Performance suits. It's not like swimsuits. It's a performance suit. And if you look at all the athletes that they sponsor, they're legit top notch, like triathletes, swimmers at the amateur level and at the professional level, et cetera, et cetera. And they have graciously decided to sponsor our little podcast here. I was like, well, it's like philosophy and lifestyle podcast because I talk a shitload about swimming and manscaping and skincare regimens. So they were on board for it. But anyway, if you go to engineswim.com and you purchase anything at checkout, you will get a 20% discount if you use the checkout code OWLS. That's OWLS. So go to engineswim.com and look at all their stuff. They've got swim goggles, they've got backpacks, they have athletic gear that's not necessarily swim related, but just like athletic gear, shorts and shirts and tank tops and tighter clothes for both men and women, and really actually wherever you fall in the gender spectrum, I guess that doesn't matter, right? And then they also do have those performance suits, and then they have like just regular, I guess we would call them Speedos, like the trim ones. Then they also have like the longer ones that are like the cool sleek ones that look like spandex pants. Those things are great. Those things make you feel like a fucking dolphin, by the way, when you're swimming in the water. They have swim caps.
Didn't you read Thomas Nagel? You don't know what it's like to be a dolphin.
No, I know. I've communicated with them before. So I have seen them glide through the water, and I have felt that gliding. What is it like to be a dolphin would be my philosophical essay. What it feels like is wearing engine swim clothing. That's what it fucking feels like. But they've got goggles, they've got backpacks, they've got cool neoprene backpacks, they've got hats, they've got all kinds of other accessories and things like that. So go to engineswim.com. They also have some Christmas specials running right now. And like I said, if you at checkout use the promotional code OWLS, OWLS, then you will get 20% off. And they ship all around the world, so you don't have to be in Australia. They are Australian based, but you could be in America, UK, France. You could be in Nigeria, for goodness sake. Just get your badass dolphin swim gear at engineswim.com.
And don't forget also, if you want to support us in other ways, you can go to patreon.com/owlsatdawn and get access to several different things that we offer to our loyal patrons, including the monthly newsletter, which has extra shitty minutes and sticky leaves and recommendations in it, as well as access to bonus episodes and the ability to vote in the upcoming patron-sponsored episode.
Yeah.
So get on that.
Yeah. Do we have any reviews to tackle?
I don't believe we do.
Do we have any other housekeeping?
I don't believe we do. Let's get into these decade questions. Yeah?
Let's get into these decade questions, homie. You go first, because this was your idea, so the floor is yours.
So I'm asking you the question first? Is what you're saying?
Oh, wait. I guess I should ask you a question first, huh? Yeah. Okay, I'll ask you a question first. All right. Decade questions for Troy. First one. What popular film this past decade do you think has been the most overrated?
So I'm going to be pedantic and equivocate a bit on what constitutes a popular film.
I was going to say that like literally just now, and I was going to say you can interpret this however you want. No, you just do it. Okay.
No, because I have different answers for different intentions of popular, right? So is popular just in terms of box office, or is it in terms of like critical appeal, or both, some combination of the two? So what I did is I went on to IMDb's top films, top rated films of the decade. And in their list of like the top 250 films, there's probably 10 or so that are from this decade.
Okay.
And so a few of them that I found that I think are definitely overrated for different reasons and in different magnitudes. Of the, just in terms of popularity, in terms of like, cultural appeal and stuff, the some of the Avengers films, specifically like the first two, really just kind of the whole franchise. And for reasons we've talked about ad nauseum in this podcast, and so I don't have to recapitulate all that stuff, right? But just the idea of pure fan service without any sort of challenging material, right? We've talked about that before. They're not bad films. They're not awful. They're not like eyesores or anything like that. Although the second one was definitely an eyesore. Like I was confused the whole time about what was happening.
I don't even remember. Was that Age of Ultron?
Yeah.
I literally don't even remember it.
But who really even, me neither, but who really cares about that? We talked about it before. In terms of like popular and also critically acclaimed.
Okay.
I couldn't decide between three films, and I want you to kind of help me figure out which one is the most overrated. Okay. One is Green Book, which we talked about in the podcast before.
Oh, yeah.
One Best Picture definitely was viewing why racism is bad through a white person's eyes. And not a bad film, actually. I watched it and was actually surprised that it wasn't as bad as I expected. It's certainly a good film just in and of itself, but certainly wasn't like the cultural impact. Didn't have the cultural impact that you would think it might have, given its status in the by winning Best Picture and stuff like that. And then the other two films that probably I think are actually having a more visceral dislike for were Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, which I just did not like and thought was bad, and like really came out kind of angry after watching it. And then Gone Girl, which I also came out angry after watching it. Although this was many years ago, so I don't remember as much about it. But I remember coming out of it thinking, this movie is awful. Everybody in it is awful. Everybody making it is awful. And I never want to think about this movie again. And I never did until today. So thanks for that.
You're welcome.
Do you have any thoughts about which of those should take the cake?
I'm surprised you didn't say like Lincoln.
I never actually saw Lincoln.
I was thinking Lincoln.
I never saw it, if you can believe that. I never said, you know what I want to spend the next 2.5 hours doing? Watching Lincoln.
Yeah, I mean, Daniel Day-Lewis is always going to get acting attention. Like, he could do anything, right? And he's going to get nominated. So his performance is transformative and bravura and all of those terms that we could heap upon him, those terms of praise. But, you know, I just kind of thought that it was kind of overrated. That would have been my choice, I think. But of the three you mentioned, I mean, Gone Girl was just so popular because of the book, right?
Yeah, and the stars in it were big. What was it, like Ben Affleck and Rosamund Pike? Was that it?
Yeah. Yeah. You know, Ben Affleck's on his resurgence at this point, you know, after his fall from grace with Gigli, and then he kind of climbed his way back with The Town, and then various other things that he directs and whatnot. You know, he kind of...
He's not reached his peak yet since you know, Mallrats. So that was
So, I mean, I don't know. I kind of remember enjoying Gone Girl. I think Green Book, it's one of those relative things. Like, it's not a bad movie. It's just relative to the praise that it got. Then
exactly, yeah.
The problems become more kind of protracted. And then Three Billboards, I fell asleep in. So I don't really have anything to say about it. I like don't even remember it. I just remember the hubbub. So...
Yeah, Three Billboards was just kind of, it was nihilistic in a way that was not, to me, interesting or important or saying anything that was worth giving the time over for, right? I do think in some sense that it's a clever movie in certain ways, and I've liked the movies that, I forget the name of the director, Irish guy, right?
Yeah.
What he's done before. But yeah,
Martin McDonagh.
Martin McDonagh. There's a certain kind of nihilism that makes you feel like the filmmakers and creators are giving you the middle finger for coming to watch this movie a little bit. And not in like an ironic, clever way, but in like this is actually a serious thing that I'm doing by flipping you off. That made me a little upset. I didn't like it. And I don't really get upset that easily. So thanks, Three Billboards.
Yeah. All right. Over to you.
All right. Next one, Austin, which movie the last decade affected you the most? And I left it ambiguous as what affected means so you could interpret it as you wish.
Yeah, I'm glad. I actually struggled with the word affected because I thought about it in two different ways, and I actually answered it in two different ways with three different films. So the films that affected me most potently were a film called Smashed by James Ponsoldt from 2012 and a film called Like Crazy by Drake Doremus that stars Anton Yelchin. Those films had a great affective impact on me for a couple of reasons. So Like Crazy, I'll start with. I was in a long-distance relationship when I saw this film in 2012.
That was a long time ago, dude.
Yeah. And this is And this is a film about a couple who meet. He's American, she's English. They meet in America while she's studying here, and she overstays her visa to stay with him. She goes back to the UK. She tries to come back to visit him, and she's been barred from entering the country for whatever duration because she overstayed her visa requirement or her visa allotments, right? And so then it's about them kind of dealing with that long distance tension. He can go visit her, but then she can't come visit him, and then they start seeing other people. Actually, Jennifer Lawrence is in this before she gets fucking crazy huge, by the way. So she's one of the girls, like the girl that he kind of has a tryst with after they kind of go through some of their problems and they break up for a little bit or whatever.
Oh, yeah. I remember you talking about this before on the podcast now. It's coming back to me.
Yeah, this movie for me, it was affective at one level. I remember the first time I watched it. I was on an airplane. I believe I was between Chicago and California. Oh no, I'm sorry, between Chicago and the UK. That's it. I was coming back from the UK coming back from Chicago to the UK where I was living at the time, and I watched this, and it fucked me up. I remember I was just sitting, and I think I had like the row of seats to myself, and I just remember fucking like crying and shit, and it just really fucked me up because my girl and I at the time were having those tensions. She was living in California and I was living in Scotland, and so yeah, that was brutal, man. So that film affected me in that way. And And then the other film, Smashed, was a film by James Ponsoldt. This is the film that he did before he did like The Spectacular Now, which I actually really like as well. But Smashed isn't as technically a good film as like The Spectacular Now is, but it affected me in such an interesting way to the point that I actually don't really ever want to watch it again because it had such a profound impact on me that I feel like if I watch it again, I'll see more of the cracks in the script. And I don't want to ruin the lovely experience that I had with the film. But it's basically about this couple who are an alcoholic. It's Mary Elizabeth Winstead and Aaron Paul. And it's a very sort of, similar to Like Crazy, it's a very sort of stripped back film. You can tell it's very improvised, that these actors were kind of given a lot of free rein with the script to kind of work off of each other. And this couple they're like functional alcoholics, like radical alcoholics, and I don't want to like talk too much about the script or anything like that because it really doesn't matter. Just go see these movies if you're interested. But it had such a profound impact on me. I remember after just seeing the sort of like destruction of what alcohol can do to a couple, and yeah, it's got some like kind of like sentimental elements to it that might be like overly wrought, but it was. Or overwrought, but it just hit me so hard that I kind of it's always stuck with me. And then the other reason why those two films really hit me too is this is when I started to get back into acting after taking a few years off of the entertainment world, and the style of filmmaking, that kind of stripped back improvisational acting style, is something that was also the style that I was learning, which was through the Atlantic method, through the Atlantic Theater School or the Atlantic Theater Company. And then through like their kind of satellite schools that they had in the UK and whatnot. And it was a very sort of like similar style. And so that's another reason why those films hit me. But then I got to just say real quick, this isn't really answering the question. This is kind of unfair and I'm taking a long time, but I'll just say this. The films of Lars von Trier. All of the films of Lars von Trier. I got obsessed with von Trier. I got obsessed with Dogma 95. I got obsessed again with that stripped back, no fluff and no frills, improvised stuff, handheld cameras. Like, let's just let the performers perform. It's about the script, the actors, the story, and that's it, right? Nothing else matters. And so those three things, I mean, even though the von Trier is like a set or a collection, those three kind of had the biggest impact on me, I think, over the last decade. No, and then, of course, von Trier films, because they're also just fucked up and crazy. And I think that was the first time. His films were the first ones that I really allowed myself to really get into at an intellectual level. It was him and Terrence Malick, but von Trier was the one because it was Antichrist. That was the film. And it was when the blogosphere was going crazy in like 2010, like writing all of these think pieces about Antichrist. That in the Tree of Life, and then that was like really what started my journey into like art house cinema. So those are the ones.
No, that's good. I'm glad you gave it that much of a wide interpretation.
Yes. Okay, so the next one for T-Roy here. So instead of what popular film, what popular album this past decade do you think has been the most overrated?
So I obviously had a really hard time with this since I dedicate much more thought and attention and care to music than to film. And so again, I had the issue of what constitutes popularity, right? Because I'm not going to say like, oh, Beyonce's Lemonade or some shit like that, right? Because like who really cares? Like obviously that's might be the most popular album of the entire decade. And I just don't, I mean, it's not like awful pop music or anything, but I just don't really care. So I tried to think of something that's generally considered to be like critically acclaimed and maybe in some sense an artistic triumph that I just could never really get into. And that would be Grimes, specifically Art Angels, but also Visions. Are you familiar with her at all?
Oh, yeah.
She's the synth pop artist was or is dating Elon Musk. I don't know.
Yeah. I like me some Grimes.
Yeah, dude. I tried to get into this stuff, and I'm just like, I'll just go listen to The Knife. Like, The Knife is the good version of this. So I don't know why I need to. But what this is other than like synth pop, which is trying to be more creative than usual synth pop, but not really being more creative. It's not awful or bad or anything necessarily. I just don't think that it's the like synth pop becomes art um, sort of piece that some people seem to think it is, which is what the knife actually is. So, go listen to the knife instead of Grimes.
I only know from the knife. I only know the cover that they do of oh God, what's that song? Oh, fuck.
The knife does?
Yeah.
Or the Jose Gonzalez song?
Yeah, that one. What's that one called?
Teardrops?
Yeah, that song. I think that's the only one I really know of theirs. And it's great, but that's kind of all I know.
Yeah, they're great for sure. I also thought maybe like what would be someone that I actually do like, but who I think is sort of gets overwrought praise. And I'm going to get yelled at by some people that I know who listen to this podcast. But Bon Iver, man. I like Bon Iver, especially his first couple albums. His new like electronic stuff I think is okay, but not all that great. But even his early stuff, I'm just like, well, this is okay. Like it's good. It's not bad. Like his like weird falsetto voice is kind of annoying, and like the folk song structures are not super creative or all that original. Like if you want that style done, I think better just listen to like Iron and Wine or something like that. His early albums. So yeah, Bon Iver I think is good, but he's certainly. I mean, I'm seeing like his first couple albums on the end of decade lists, top 10 stuff, and I'm just like I don't get that at all. All right, next one.
Hit me up.
All right, this is what I'm interested in hearing from you. What is the most surprising way you think you'll change by 2030?
Ooh, yeah. See this,
in which you'll be in your mid 40s.
Yeah, yeah. So this is tough because, like, I think it's really hard for us to ever know who we are in the present, and I think it's really hard for us to be accurate about who we are in the past. And therefore, I think speculations about where I will be in the future are simply fantasies. So,
let's do the fantasies, man.
This is the fantasy.
Enjoy your symptom.
Yeah. I mean, I feel like I'm at like a corner right now. I've been dealing these past couple of years have been really interesting, but this past year, and then obviously with the health scare, I feel like I'm especially at like a corner. I'm just reevaluating a lot of stuff, and so I don't know how far I can take this because I don't know how serious this. I really don't know what these words fully mean. So, but I think that I will settle quite a bit. And I don't mean in the sense of stasis. Like, I don't think I will ever be just like satisfied with like just simply doing minimal amounts of things or whatever. Like I think I am just like the, what is it, Thomas the Train or whatever, like the little engine that could, or whatever the fuck it is, like like I think I can, I think I can, I think I can is just like my life motto, right? So, but I think I will be more clear and more intentional about only pursuing things that I'm fully invested in. And that's what I mean by settling. Because I feel like, especially over the past decade in particular, but really my whole life, I've been very much like, people say go with the flow, but it's more like I feel like a leaf blown in the wind, but at the same time, I'm like a kite. So I'm not like just a leaf because I'm a kite because I can like ride the wind. Like some people, they feel like they're being tossed to and fro and they don't like it. Whereas me, I'm kind of like, ooh, I like the waves, like fucking blow harder, man. And then I feel like I can productively engage with it. Whereas I think that by 2030, I think that I'll be a little bit more like I'll have, if I'm going to use this metaphor, I'll be more like an airplane fighting against the wind a little bit more. And so I feel like I'm kind of at that corner where I'm cutting out things in my life that I'm trying not to engage as much in. I'm trying not to be as unserious about certain things. I don't think that necessarily means I'm trying to be more serious, but I'm not trying to be unserious. And I do think there's a distinction there, And so, yeah, I think that in 2030, I think it'll be interesting, actually, if we could use it as like a time capsule, right?
Yeah, right.
To see how yeah. But I do think that I will be investing in things and people, and I always do a little bit, but then I also am very diffuse. I tend to say yes to a lot of projects, and I tend to participate in just too many fucking things, and it saps my potency and my vitality a little bit. And I do think that I'm taking proactive steps to mitigate that tendency towards diffusion.
You think you'll be married and have kids? Prediction right now.
Yeah, see, this is the thing. I didn't want to answer like specific like material things. I was trying to keep it more abstract because I have no fucking clue.
Hey, a wife and a kids aren't material. They're spiritual. They're supernatural. Come on.
Yeah.
Don't be a reductive materialist here.
Or no. Do I think I really don't know. I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I kind of wonder if I will like always be bachelor adjacent. You know?
That sounds like a good Netflix sitcom.
Bachelor adjacent?
Yeah, dude.
Yeah, but I do wonder. I do wonder that a lot, you know? So, I don't know. All right.
I'm going to say yes.
Yeah?
I think you'll have your youth pastor job out in the mountains. Wife, kids, the whole deal. A lot of cigars, a lot of craft brews.
Listen, man, there is a chance.
There is a possible world, yeah. Nearby possible world.
Definitely. Okay, my next one for you. What philosophical movement, idea, or trend was your least favorite?
So I came up with a few different ones, although, philosophy moves pretty slow.
Yep.
So the idea that there was a philosophical movement, which is like basically just in the 2010s, is probably impossible. And even if there was, we wouldn't know about it for 20 years until like the papers that influence the movement or whatever become coalesced as a movement or whatever, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's very rare that you have something like, say, speculative materialism, which kind of grew up in a year's time and like had a name and had several books that were like the harbingers of the movement or whatever. So this may not be exactly confined to the 2010s, but I think it's largely a more recent phenomenon. I came up with three that all kind of circled around the same basic idea. So one is experimental philosophy, which, if you're familiar with that, is like this sort of methodological movement in especially Anglo-American philosophy for doing lots of like surveys on people's intuitions about issues, especially ethical issues, to try and import some like quantitative analysis methodology into philosophy. And the idea of doing things like that to inform philosophical speculation is not bad at all, I don't think. But there's certainly a sense, I think, in this movement of like basically trying to like make philosophy into a scientific discipline, and scientific in the like very narrow sense of the way science is done in terms of quantitative analysis, like in very narrow disciplines, not the like broad range of science throughout history.
Mm-hmm.
And then also quietism, which is like a movement it's more about making philosophy more of a therapeutic idea and less speculative. And then broadly speaking, naturalism, or the idea of making philosophy more of a scientific discipline, or reducing it in some way to purely natural objects, which are also the objects of scientific study. Mm. So as you can see, the through line here is the idea of trying to make philosophy more empirical and less a priori. I talked about it plenty of times before. I don't have to like recapitulate the whole argument, but I don't think anything is wrong, obviously, with dealing with empirical issues. Philosophy needs to have a certain structured relationship with the empirical, right? But the idea that you can reduce it to that, I think, kind of destroys philosophy's efficacy. There is a priori knowledge, I think, and issues that philosophy can tackle, and its relationship to the empirical should be one that we actually have to like reconsider and think about. Like, it's a philosophical issue, what philosophy's relationship to science and the empirical is. It's not just science tells us what to do and we do it kind of a thing.
Yeah.
And that's not just because, philosophy is like, science should be like our handmaiden and we're the ones who existed before science or whatever, right? No, it's just about actually thinking about what the relationship is. And there's some sense in which science is going to tell us things and then we have to deal with it, right? We need to think about why that is and actually have a considered kind kind of theoretical orientation towards science, and one that's not just sort of passive in the way that I think these movements can sometimes be in their sort of worst guises.
Mm. I had not heard of quietism.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's a movement in the way that maybe experimental philosophy is, where it's very clear this is experimental philosophy, right? There's even like journals and conferences that are named that.
Mm.
So it's much more diffuse than that.
Mm. Interesting. Interesting.
All right, next one for you. What's most different about you since 2010?
Yeah, this one's also really hard for me, right? It's similar to the last one because the last one's really speculative and this one is really reflective.
And you already said that reflective knowledge is difficult.
Yeah. So I was kind of vague here, but I mean, I think just in very broad strokes, what's most different about me, I think, is that in 2010, right? Or let's say at the end of 2009, really, which is 10 years ago now, right? So what was going on is I was graduating from undergrad and preparing to go off to grad school. Or maybe I had just started, or maybe I was already in grad school. But either way, I can't remember actually. But either way, I was still holding on to a lot of religious convictions. But I think not, like obviously we talk a lot about like beliefs and things like that. And that's great. That's fine. But I think even more about like how to live my life is what I was thinking about. So again, I was in a long-term relationship at this time. I was in a serious relationship at this time. It wasn't quite long-term at this point, but I guess it kind of was. But serious relationship at this time. And I thought that I was going down the marriage, kids. Remember this? I was either thinking I was going to be like a theologian or that I was somehow going to be an academic at this point. And I was thinking like the settled life, the marriage, kids, still going to church Sundays. I was either, if I was still in LA, I was a part of that like the Church Copper Hill, which was kind of, I mean, the conservatives called them emerging, but they weren't part of the emerging church because they were still fucking Calvinist and they were, they were pretty conservative and Orthodox.
Yeah, but they openly drank beer, dude.
Yeah, we used to drink beer, smoke cigars, and play poker. I fucking love that church. But still, they were still kind of traditional in terms of like how you live your life, sort of thing, for the most part, right? And I think that has changed drastically now. That the kind of the family, the career, the house, the be involved in your church community and serve once or twice a year on a missions trip, like that kind of stuff, I still was holding on to right at the beginning of the decade. And I don't just mean like the belief elements too, but even like the convictions about what it means to be a good person and how I should live my life and don't drink and don't have premarital sex and stuff like that. Like, even though I was in a sexual relationship with my partner and we were not married, I still felt guilty about it, Those were things that were holding on quite deeply. And that shit now has gone out the window. So I have become a hoe, in other words.
You a thought.
Yeah. But I think that stuff, just like not necessarily the belief stuff, that has obviously changed, but more just like praxis, orthopraxy, like what I think it means to live has changed radically. To live well or to live ethically has changed radically.
Yeah, dude. I went through the same process at just about the exact same time in different parts of the world. And it's crazy to think about that exactly a decade ago. All that shit was going down. I feel like in some way the same person who went through that. And in some ways I can't even understand how I felt the things that I felt at the time.
Yeah, that's why
it would not happen the same way now.
Yeah, that's why reflecting is so hard, because I sat here for like 15 minutes and I was like, fuck, what did I believe then? Like,
well,
who
yeah, that
was
time was
I?
such a tumultuous time of just not knowing what you believe. Subjective destitution, man. That idea became so just experientially, I don't know what you'd call it. Like, it became clear that that kind of a thing can happen. That you just, all of your sense of yourself and your beliefs about the world are just unwound into nothingness, and you're just left with nothing but anxiety.
Mm.
Yeah, that was not great.
No, man, not.
It was both exhilarating and awful at the same time, and you felt even more miserable because of the combination of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, your turn. Is there a new type of cuisine that you've tried this past decade that has changed your world a little bit?
I'm glad you asked this question, because I think I've mentioned before that the last maybe 2 or 3 years, I've really gotten into cooking at home. And I'd always, cooked a little bit, but usually stuff like, Bertolli's or Amy's, things you can just throw in throw in the pan and cook for 15 minutes and you're done, right? Nothing that's really cooking. In the last couple of years, I've really gotten into cooking a little bit more from scratch, and not, of my own volition, like I'm following recipes and stuff, because I don't have the creativity to actually come up with stuff myself, unless it's pizza related, right? But one thing I've really just fell in love with the last couple of years, really all Asian food is good, no matter what, pretty much, but especially Korean food. And that, obviously isn't just because I'm like creative or anything. Korean food has been having a bit of a boom in America the last few years, right? But from bibimbap and kimchi to beef bulgogi and everything else, it's just all so good and so tasty. And, it seems to me there's many different things about it that are so great, but the sauces, man, the sauces are just incredible. Like, have you tried gochujang sauce?
I don't know. I mean, not that I can recall by name, but it's possible.
It's also called Korean chili paste. If you've gone to like Korean barbecue, you've probably tried it at some point.
Okay.
But it's like this. It's sweet and savory and spicy because it's a chili paste at the same time.
That sounds perfect for me.
It's, oh my God, it is. I put it on everything.
Really?
Everything. It's the most amazing. It's awful probably for you. I'm sure it's super sugary and has all this nasty stuff in it, but it is so good. Like, just put gochujang on any meat or any rice bowl you come into contact with, and it will just make it the most delicious thing you've ever tasted.
Do you just do you make this sauce and then just put it on, like, I don't know, like you're having pizza and you're like, I'm gonna put some of this fucking this Korean sauce on?
I actually haven't tried it on pizza, but that's a great idea. I'm gonna do that. Yeah, you can buy gochujang sauce pretty much anywhere.
Okay. Interesting. When you said Korean food, I didn't know where you were going to go with that, because I think the only thing that I've really ever had that I know of as being Korean is Korean barbecue. Like, that's the only thing I know of when I think of Korean food. Yeah,
that's kind of been around the longest, right? But I think more versions of Korean food are making their debut in the States, especially in Southern California. So maybe less so in, Southeastern Australia.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, that's like the popular Korean food too. I'm sure there's lots more in-depth stuff that's out there that I'm not familiar with, but damn it, it's all good.
For sure.
All right. This is a question I definitely want you to answer in detail. What's the worst place you've lived in the last decade?
Yeah, that's interesting, because I've moved around quite a bit.
Yeah, that's why.
Yeah, I've lived in 6 different countries, and within those countries, I've moved around into quite a few different places within them. You know what? Worst place that I lived this last decade was Los Angeles. And
wait, you do? Oh yeah, because you live in Silver Lake. That's right. I forgot.
And I lived in Los Feliz. But so for people who don't know, I moved away for school. Then I was gone for a while. Then I came back, and I was kind of doing a back and forth thing. And then in 2014, I moved back to LA, and I thought that I was going to be there kind of permanently. I was involved in the entertainment industry. I was working at a production company, and I thought that that was it, right? Like, because I grew up in the acting world, and when I was in my early 20s, I was an actor before I had my conversion, and then I went through school, and then I started to become a pastor and shit like that, and then I moved out of that. But I thought, like, I felt like I gave up on the entertainment industry, and I never felt right, but I gave up on it for a reason, because I kind of got caught up in some drugs, and I was just I just felt shitty, I guess you would say, and then the spirit got a hold of me and gave me a purpose, sort of thing, and so I dropped all that shit, and I thought that my purpose was to, like, serve God's kingdom. And so then in 2014, I had gotten back into the entertainment industry in the UK, and I had been doing a lot of acting and a lot of producing, and even directing a little bit of some small things. And I was like, you know what? Like, I'm mature enough now. I can actually go back to LA, and I won't get caught up in all the bullshit that dragged me down previously. And so that was kind of my thinking, and it didn't work. I fell into a lot of the habits. I got sucked into a lot of the kind of industry stuff that I didn't even realize when I was younger that was vacuous, and that kind of probably affected me in a particular way. But that really potently, especially after going through these deep intellectual and spiritual and, like, religious experiences over, you know, the kind of previous, let's say, God, like 6-7 years now at this point, or like, yeah, 6, 7, 8 years at this point. I didn't realize, like, how superficial LA was, and how much that just wouldn't fulfill and satisfy me. And so it wasn't even so much that LA sucked per se, it was just that it's not for me anymore, you know? And so there's a lot of cool stuff about LA. Like, Silver Lake and Los Feliz are great. I fucking love those little areas in terms of cafes and shops and good little bars, and there's all kinds of, like, there's a buzz around there because that's where all, like, the artists live, and the young actors and producers and writers and production assistants and everyone. So there's a vibrancy of creativity going on, but it just wasn't for me anymore, man. I couldn't deal. Like, I think I've used this anecdote a lot, but I remember where I was sitting at this restaurant that I used to go to all the time with the girl that I was seeing at the time, who was also, like, a girl I was doing a lot of work with. In, like, TV stuff, and we were sitting down with a producer, and I remember him just straight up telling me, he was like, you know, you got to just compromise on your principles and forget all of these ideas that you have, and you got to just do the stuff that you don't want to do now, and you do that for 10, 15, 20 years. He's like, and then maybe you'll be able to do the stuff that you really want to do. And I was like, well, fuck that shit. What if I just want to be on, like, the indie scene for the rest of my life? And he's like, nah, man, you won't make any money. You can't get any funding. He's like, you got to basically sell your soul. And I was like, it's like, fuck that. And then I started realizing that everybody was thinking that way. And I had this TV show that we were optioning with NBC Universal. And I remember being in a meeting with the senior vice president. And I should have been, like, super stoked about trying to pitch this TV show idea that people were into. And it just felt wrong. And I think part of it, too, was, like, the relationship that I was in just wasn't quite right either. And I was trying to force...
This was the reality show you told me about, right?
Yeah. And I think I was just trying to force a few, like, square pegs into round hole sort of things. And it just made me, like, not like LA. It just, yeah. And so it's funny now, because now when I go back, I'm like, oh, it's just not home for me anymore. You know? Like, now I can really just admit it, and I can be like, oh, it's just not home. Like, it's just not me. It's not for me right now. Whereas before, I thought that was it, you know? So... yeah, LA.
Are you glad you did it, though, at that time, so that it was kind of out of your system?
Yeah. I guess you could say that. Yeah, and absolutely. And you know what's amazing? My experience there as a producer with the production company, and then obviously doing the other stuff with the side stuff that I was doing with the TV show and some various other projects that I was involved in, gave me the skills and the confidence that have enabled me to undertake the adaptation of Inventing the Future. Because in 2016, when I was back in Scotland, I was sitting in a library reading the book Inventing the Future, and I said to myself, this needs to be made into a documentary. And so I got in touch with Nick and Alex, then I got in touch with Verso, then I optioned the script, I secured the rights to it, then I found Isaiah, hired Isaiah, and the fact that it all just came together so quickly was so lovely. Now that was 3 years ago now, but it's coming out next year, by the way, folks, people. But I would never have been able to undertake that, and I would have never been able to meet the people from Wisecrack, which I've been doing a lot of work with them now, which has obviously helped our podcasts. Like, how many people have found Owls at Dawn because of Wisecrack, you know?
Yeah,
So
yeah.
a lot of great stuff came out of it. Like, not even just because I met people there and I made connections there, but just like the confidence and the experience and the skills that I picked up there. So a lot of good stuff did come from it, and it wouldn't have happened. Like, I wouldn't have had that great sort of like synthesis between like my artistic interests and my philosophical interests that culminated in both Wisecrack and Inventing the Future were it not for that time that I had there. So obviously there are good things that came out of it, and it was the perfect timing to go back and get it out of my system and also learn some skills at that time that really helped me like hybridize the academic, intellectual, philosophical pursuits with the entertainment, artistic pursuits. So yeah.
Yeah, it's cool you put it that way because, you know, man, so much of our, as different as we are as people, so much of our life experiences mirror each other in these ways. Like, I can't remember if we talked about on the podcast before. We probably have that, you know, me and a friend of ours, mutual friend of ours, had a pizza restaurant that we owned together in the early parts of the decade. And there are times when I think about, you know, it didn't work out very well, certainly, and in lots of different ways. But there's some sense in which, you know, I wonder, that experience, as bad as it was, convinced me that I needed to be back in the academic world. That was my world. That's where I needed to put down roots. And I wonder if I would have been as confident if I hadn't gone through that experience. Would I like get through the PhD program and, you know, survive and not had those doubts of, is this really for me? Should I be doing something else? If I hadn't had that experience and gotten it out of my system, would I really know what my future should be and have the motivation to fill it out? And I wonder. I don't know if I would.
You know what, too? There's probably a lot of just, for lack of a better word, there are skills that you learn in business and running your own business that give you that confidence that are going to like catapult you well in advance of so many other people who are academics who only just went through school, and they didn't have that quote-unquote real-world experience. And I know that that sometimes is a stupid trope that people use. It's like, oh, you got a real-world... But that shit actually, it makes you more advanced. Like, the fact that I have experienced so much shit outside of academia makes me a strange breed of academic. And it also gives me a confidence and a set of people skills, administrative skills, like organizing conferences and helping with things like that. Like just things of being able to go into a situation and kind of just help out wherever I can using the skills that I have, analyzing a problem solving, like that I have those things that I probably wouldn't have had otherwise. And I guarantee you the same shit with you and your business that you ran, right?
Yeah, and there's something about the actual skills that you learn, you know, that's true. But it really is a lot more about how it changes you as a person.
Yeah.
It makes you an adult. It makes you have to get shit done that you don't really want to do. It makes you have long-term goals and figure out like the hypothetical imperative, right? Get those necessary conditions down pat.
Yeah.
So, and that's the stuff that, you know, it's a possibility you might not get that if you're 23 entering a PhD program right out of your bachelor's or something like that, right? That doesn't mean that it makes you better. I certainly wish that my path wasn't as circuitous as it was in many ways. But there's some benefits to it too.
True that. Okay. Next question. Your favorite question. Who have been your two favorite role players on the Lakers and why?
Oh man, this is such a hard question. I had sleepless nights over this. So the Lakers have only been good at the beginning of this decade and right now in the last few months of the decade. In between, they were awful. So it didn't feel right to pick a role player from the down years because everybody was a role player for a number of those years and they were just bad. And so it's kind of hard to... Role players are really your favorite when they're a role player on a really good team, right? So I picked someone from the early part of the decade when the Lakers were winning championships, and then from right now as the 2 points of the decade where the team was good. So from the old school team in 2010, it's Lamar Odom. Lamar Odom was my
Lamar.
guy, dude.
Yeah.
And I would have loved him even more if he existed now because his game is so well suited to the way it's played today. Lamar Odom, he was a 6'10 lefty, super skilled, great ball handling, great passer. Super fun game to watch because he was such a highlight reel and so unselfish at the same time. And I love those big forwards with passing skills and dribbling skills, like triple threats.
Yeah.
That's the best kind of player to watch. And in addition to like his actual game, he was also really like a mercurial guy. He had a kind of tragic childhood. I think like his dad walked out on his family and his mom died when he was young, something like that. I can't remember exactly. He had some friends, several close friends and family members, like brothers, I think maybe, who died through because of interactions with like the drug trade in New York, I think. Really tragic life. I think he had a baby who died from SIDS, sudden infant death syndrome, when he was a couple months old. Just really tragic shit. And then you may have heard a couple years ago he, I think, overdosed in a Vegas casino or something and had like massive brain damage. And he didn't actually die. People were expecting him to not make it through.
I think it was a bunny ranch that he was at.
Oh, was it?
Yeah, something like that. But yeah.
Yeah, just really tragic shit. Like nobody should have to go through the kind of stuff that he's been through in his life. But he's still trucking. And when that all happened, the outpouring of love that came from all of his former teammates and fans just really showed how people just felt for this guy. Like you can be a millionaire and have all the success in the world and win championships and everything and still have just a life full of tragedy. And he did. And I think that in addition to his game really makes you feel for him.
One of the things I will always associate him with is, remember when they were focusing on how he like ate a bag of candy every day or some shit like that?
Yeah.
Was that real or was that just like a joke thing?
I'm sure he ate a lot of candy.
But it was ridiculous. Sure. Like he had a guy that like was his candy.
Yeah, his candy guy.
Supplier, remember? And I think they're like all these like little YouTube videos or documentaries or whatever. He would like buy bags of candy for Lamar, and Lamar was just constantly like chewing gum or eating Jolly Ranchers or whatever. He like always had something sweet in his mouth.
Yeah, dude, he lacked it in life, so he needed it in candy.
I guess, man.
But dude, can you imagine if he was around today with like the modern fitness regimen and dietary specialists and shit like that, and the way that game's played today, having this like 6'10" guy who can play point guard, oh my god, he would have been so successful.
Yeah.
And then for my current guy, I'm going with Alex Caruso.
Caruso guy. Yeah, dude.
For those who don't know, Caruso is a great story. He's a 6'4" white guy, balding, looks like an accountant. He went to Texas A&M, didn't get drafted, played in the minor leagues, the G League, for a couple of years. And then just this year, finally, after a number of years in two-way contracts with the Lakers, is a full member of the team. And he's really good, like a really good role player. ESPN has this metric called RPM, or real plus minus, which tries to like top-down measure your influence on the game, which can usually be sort of quantified in terms of plus minus, like the amount your team scores when you're on the floor minus the amount they give up, right? But then that metric doesn't really give the proper dividend to the proper players. Like you can't tell who deserves the what would you call it? Who's like the causal mechanism of that, right? So real plus minus tries to adjust it between players, right, for who you're on the court with. And Caruso's second on the team behind LeBron. He's ahead of Anthony Davis in this metric because he's such a good defensive player, passer, cutter. There's all that kind of stuff that a not terribly skilled white guy can do. He's a throwback player in that sense, and I love him. And he also had this like ridiculous Photoshop this year of him working out and being hugely buff and jacked, straight up like Kumail Nanjiani style. He's going to be a Marvel superhero. And he got drug tested the next day.
I was going to say he did, didn't he? Oh gosh, it's so funny because
he also has the great nickname, the Bald Mamba, which is wonderful.
Bald Mamba. He's not physically skilled as a defender, but he always seems to be in the right place. He drew like 4 charges in the last game or something ridiculous like that.
Yeah, it's crazy.
He's drawing charges. He gets his hands in passing lanes. He tips balls away. Like, there was a play a few games ago where someone on the Lakers score, and then the other team was just being lazy with their inbound, and he just like, I think he came up from behind the guy, and as the point guard's dribbling the ball up court, he just kind of pickpockets it. You know, like, he does that kind of stuff all the time.
Once a game, he does that. Once a game, he steals the inbounds pass. It's crazy.
Yeah, and it really is great. And then on top of that, as much as you think that he's not very athletic, the motherfucker has hops, bro.
Yeah, he does. He is athletic. He's just not laterally athletic, but he can jump. Like, he's like volleyball athletic. He can get up there.
Yeah, I mean, he's got some of the best rebound dunks, right?
Because he goes hard. Right,
Yeah.
and he's like total reckless abandon. He'll do it over people. He did a rebound dunk or putback dunk over Kevin Durant last year against the Warriors, which was an all-time great. You can look that up on YouTube.
Oh, that's cool. Okay, then I just have to ask you this just while we're still on the Lakers subject. So during the time period when they sucked, who's your favorite player? Not role player, but favorite player. Not Kobe.
I don't know. I mean, those years that they sucked, Kobe was awful. And it was really hard to watch. Coming back from that injury and stuff. I mean, so many of those years I just did not like. I mean, I guess probably D'Angelo Russell and Lonzo Ball were my 2 favorite players. They were the ones I was rooting for the most.
Okay.
But they were young and inexperienced and not very good for a lot of that time because they were young and on a bad team and had bad coaches and had bad players around them.
So not a Nick Young fan, huh?
No, I was not. I was not a Nick Young fan. I didn't get the whole like he's a free spirit, man. No, dude, he stinks and takes bad shots and doesn't play defense. I'm not into it.
All right.
Next one. What is something that you hated in 2010 that you love now?
See, this is so hard because I really don't hate many things or anything
relative to what your expectations are.
Yeah, so I actually went with something that's really just been a developing love over the past year, and it's more, I hated this out of ignorance, I might say, but it's poetry. I think if you would have talked to me in 2009, 2010 about poetry, I might have paid like some bullshit lip service trying to be a good academic, like young, like as you're supposed to do when you're playing the game. But I didn't really enjoy it. I didn't get it. I didn't spend any time with it. I might have had like a very vague appreciation for it, but I didn't quite get it. Now, it was right around this time, because I'm trying to think of when it was that I graduated. I don't even fucking remember, that I took my class on Milton. And that really is what opened up my eyes and changed things, right? But even then, it was more conceptual. And it was because I had an amazing teacher, right, as an undergrad. But I don't think I really got poetry, really. Whereas now I fucking love it. Like, I've been reading it consistently over the past year, I'd say. And I want to continue to read more, you know, like after I finish with this Whitman, it's like this book called The Essentials of Whitman that's edited by a guy named Galway Kinnell, I think. Kinnell. You know, I want to move on to the next, you know, poetry collection, and I want to like read more into T.S. Eliot and get into some Dylan Thomas and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I'm going to have to go with poetry, man.
Yeah, it's awesome, dude. There's something about, I'm going to talk about this more against the next question, but finding a thing that you didn't realize had this intrinsic value to it and then discovering it, you know, like finally seeing the intrinsic value of it and just being enraptured by it. That's such a cool experience to have.
Yeah.
And it happens over a long period, so it's not really immediate or anything.
Yeah, totally. And poetry really is a practice. You know, I think part of the reason I didn't enjoy it is because I didn't get it. And I don't mean that in like an elitist sense, but it's like beer. When you first drink beer, you're kind of like, oh man, it's kind of bitter and it doesn't taste very good. It's an acquired taste, right? And then you learn to appreciate those flavors. And I think it's something like that with poetry, that, you know, you first read it and you're like, oh, this isn't common language. It's kind of stilted. It's weird. You know, there's all the caricatures about roses are red, violets are blue, Troy is beautiful, so I don't know. Suck
Fuck
on
you.
his boo boo. You know, like whatever, like the cheesy rhyming couplets or whatever. But I mean, really kind of, and then of course there are all the stereotypes the complete opposite way about like freeform poetry that's like a word I and then completely indented, and it's like the word detest, and then like the letters go down vertically rather than horizontally, and you're like, what the fuck is this, you know? And so there's like modern poetry that can oftentimes be, you know, on the raw end of the deal kind of thing because of certain caricatures of experimental poetry and stuff. So I feel like, you know, there's just a lot of like weird stuff circling around the concept of just the apparatus that is poetry. And so I just didn't really spend much time with it, but really starting to, the weird thing is though, is my foray into poetry has been through philosophy and through like Heidegger and post-Heideggerian thinkers, and then French philosophers, and then really I was reading some Justin Clemens, and I read his book The Mundiad, and that really kind of stoked a real interest. And then meeting my friend Darius, who's been able to kind of like help me see some of the beautiful things about poetry, and then talking about poetry and why he likes poetry and why he's drawn to poetry, and then going to poetry readings. And that's kind of, it's almost like I forced myself to like it, you know, and now I love it. It's weird.
You know, I wonder, not knowing anything about poetry really, you know, when you take like English lit classes when you're in high school or college,
yeah,
especially when you get to like, you know, post Shakespearean stuff, poetry is kind of seen as like a linguistic art form alongside other forms of literature, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like, here are the great poems, and here are the great, you know, like novels, and here are the great epics, and so on. When we look back and have a history of like the 21st century, are we not going to have poetry? Is it just going to have disappeared as an art form, really, as far as like the canon is concerned?
Mm. Yeah, that's really interesting. I wonder, do they?
Because that'll be like future people will be like, "What the fuck? Like, where'd this go?"
Yeah, do they teach much contemporary poetry in those classes at all, or does it kind of just stop at some point? You know?
Yeah, it feels like it just kind of stops, and no one really explains why. Like, the canon doesn't include poems anymore, or whatever. Obviously, people are still making them, but they're not canonized.
Yeah, it's an art form of a bygone era sort of thing. But I mean, similar, maybe you could even say with philosophy, right? Like when you're in school, you learn a little about Descartes. You might learn the name Kant. You might learn a little bit about like sociology and some various figures. And you might learn about a couple of 20th century figures. Like I at least knew Nietzsche and, well, 19th century figure, but I knew about some 20th century philosophical figures like Sartre and about like pragmatism and things like that. But like that shit isn't getting taught at all anymore. And so what, 21st century figures, like what are they going to teach? Like, I mean, is Badiou, is he like a 20th century, 21st century figure? You know, like what, Marcus Gabriel, is he going to be, are people going to talk about him in the way that previously people talked about like Kant and Descartes? I mean,
yeah, I mean, I don't think that, maybe in continental schools, it's more of a problem since there isn't really like a towering figure after maybe like Derrida and Deleuze. But I think in analytic circles, because of the focus on individual papers, intro to philosophy classes have lots of stuff from the past 15, 20 years. That's pretty normal since they're very much more narrowly focused on issues, like topical issues.
yeah, but don't you have to take philosophy in order to be exposed to that?
Yeah, so I'm saying like an intro to philosophy class would be kind of similar to like an English lit class, right?
Oh yeah, I guess, yeah.
So yeah, I think future ones will include stuff from around this issue. But yeah, but I think you are right about the idea of like the way we think about the great systematizers or even the great critics of systemization, like Nietzsche, right? We read them because they have like overarching views on many different issues, metaphysics and ethics and aesthetics and everything else, right? And do we have anything like that in the last 20 years? Yeah, I mean, maybe it's like a Badiou, but there's not a lot, you know?
It'll all be like categorical, right? Like bioethics and issues on like technology, and here are these figures that talk about AI, and these figures that talk about philosophy of technology, Yeah.
It's hard to see there being a Kant again, you know?
Interesting.
Which, you know, to be fair, there was only one. Like Kant is a towering figure because of his influence on, you know, all the different areas in philosophy, and that doesn't come every 20 years. It can't.
Right. All right, moving on. What is the single most impactful or interesting new habit that you've developed over this past decade?
Yeah, this was an interesting one. I had three answers to this, but one I've already talked about, and that's cooking.
Yeah.
I'm going to leave that aside. Another one is regularly working out, something I started doing about 3 years ago and really made a profound difference in my life. Although I still hate it.
Oh, do you?
I still don't find it intrinsically valuable. It's purely instrumentally valuable. Except for when I'm like playing basketball. That's the one thing I do find.
Well, you know what you can do? You can go to engineswim.com and upon checkout, you can get 20% off of all your swim gear.
Dude, swimming is so good for you, but I hate doing it. I don't hate doing it. I like it more than I like actually like working out in the gym, but whatever. It's harder to do.
Dude, with your beautiful locks, put it up in one of those swim caps that says Engine Swim at engineswim.com. 20% off. Owls at check. Okay, sorry. Yeah. But
so the one that I'm going to go for then, that I do find intrinsically valuable, like cooking, but I haven't mentioned yet, is reading fiction. Maybe 3 or 4 years ago, I started, and I've obviously read fiction before, but I started every evening before I go to bed, spending about half an hour reading fiction, just to get away from all the nonfiction academic stuff I have to read all day, and just reading something purely for its own sake, purely without any intent to use it for anything other than just to enjoy it and to learn from it and to have it challenge me and change me. And spending some time doing that is so important. It makes you just love reading and love the creations other people can make, and to be challenged in a way that isn't just pure like academic intellectual challenging, which is just like, how am I going to adjust my beliefs based upon this new data? But actually thinking about its significance and its meaning. And I read lots of stuff. Like I'll read, purely fun stuff. Like I read the whole, Game of Thrones, Song of Ice and Fire books, which are together longer than the Bible, which I couldn't believe after I finished it that I heard that. And then, more like serious novels from English and American history and otherwise Russian novels that I just had never gotten to, didn't read in college or in high school. And I get so much out of it. It's an absolute pleasure to do. I look forward to it every single night. And I'd encourage anybody out there, especially academics, read stuff you don't have to read. It sounds impossible because there's so much you have to do.
Yeah.
But if you already have some time set aside to just veg or just chill and not work, spend some of that reading fiction. It will make you a better writer because you're reading great writers, and a lot of academics are shitty writers. So that will help you, one. And also, it will stimulate your mind to think about important things that are different than the important things you're doing for work. I don't know if I can trace explicitly trace how it affects me and maybe makes me a better thinker or writer. Maybe it doesn't, I don't know, but it certainly feels like it does. And even if the intrinsic value of it, which I get out of it, is not there, the instrumental value I think is also there. So yeah, fiction's wonderful. There's so much great work out there. It's so much more fun to read than academic stuff most of the time. So yeah, reading fiction's wonderful. I'm so glad that I made it a habit.
Yeah. I always enjoy reading a good novel, but yet for some reason it's one of those things that I don't like seek out all that often, which is why you got me excited with your Sticky Leaves last week about Flannery O'Connor.
Oh yeah,
because that makes, like, first of all, short stories are kind of just a nice entry point, but also you got me really excited. And then I was actually talking with some friends about like Southern Gothic as a genre and her writing in particular, and so now I'm kind of like really stoked. Maybe that's I don't do the resolution thing in like a formal sense, but maybe that's a kind of something that I can try to implement as a habit for the next decade.
Yeah, dude, that'd be a great one.
Yeah.
All right, next one. What is a core belief that you had in 2010 that you lack now, or vice versa?
Yeah, this is another
one you have now that you lacked then, I mean.
Yeah. This was another hard one for me, I think. But I've kind of talked about this before. But I think a core belief that I had then was, and I wrote this down, I said, something about the alliance of Western powers being a form of imperialism. Like, I didn't believe this, or I didn't get this, or I didn't get the extent of it then. And I think I thought that fundamentally the US and its allies, for example, were decent at heart. And, not perfect, but, we're in a broken world. But
like well-intentioned, generally.
Yeah, exactly. And that the US was, and I still believed, I think at the time, that the US was an experiment, like a social experiment that was worthwhile. And I think now I actually don't buy that at all. Yeah, I think I've become much more comfortable in being able to say that to myself and out loud, that I actually do think of the United States as being like the great dragon, to use language from the book of Revelation. And I do think that the United States fundamentally operates as a type of imperial power that is responsible for a hegemonic takeover of the world, whose influence is rotting and will perpetually continue to rot social, political, and economic formulations. And it's exporting its cultural influence, which I think is in some ways fun, and then in other ways I think extremely banal and problematic. And then it's exporting certain economic instruments and regimes, and I think that also has negative consequences. And I think I'm much more comfortable feeling that, whereas I didn't, because I'm trying to think, 2009, 2010, I'm starting to read Zizek for the first time, and Lyotard, and I'm reading like Latin American liberation theology, and like Hart and Negri. I think I read Empire, I think came out at around this time, and maybe a couple years prior, and I'm reading like Paulo Virno as well. And so I'm reading some kind of critical post-Marxist stuff, and then I'm reading like the early Marx and critiques of religion and stuff like that as well. So I've definitely got a critical hat on in a formal academic sense, but I didn't quite get it, I don't think, and I think now I'm definitely much more sure. I think it is a core belief of mine that there actually is a problem of like a neo-imperial and neo-colonial presence in the world that is spearheaded by the United States and its allies.
What's so interesting about that, dude, is it seems like the only people who still have that belief after 2010 are like centrist libs, right? Because the right has kind of ditched that idea and been like, yeah, so we were always about these imperialistic methods to achieve our own ends and fuck everyone else, but we should continue doing that and just do it nakedly, right?
And so the neocons won.
Yeah, and then the left's like, well, we're doing that stuff and it's bad, and so we should stop doing it, right? So it's only these like centrist libs in the middle who are like, no, our influence is good, and sometimes we've made some mistakes, but ultimately the intentions are good, and the basic idea is sound, and we should continue doing it and just refine it around the edges, right? It's this weird thing where like the one way in which the horseshoe theory makes a little bit of sense, right? Is that the further sides of the right and left kind of agree on this basic issue about American imperialism, just differ as to whether we should continue doing it, whether it's like a morally sound thing to do. So yeah, it's a weird thing that I think a lot of people and maybe the institutions of the state itself have kind of realized is the case, except for a few people who still have the blinders on, I think.
Yeah, I wonder if the blinders are still kind of like ripples from the Obama legacy, right? Because he did a lot to, I think, entrench that ideological bent,
Oh yeah, for sure.
And so a lot of the people,
it was already there in like the Clinton,
for sure,
Clinton, like NAFTA stuff and stuff like that.
Yeah, but like the reason that it still has momentum now is that it got an extra
Yeah.
push, let's say.
It would be gone completely if not for Obama.
Yeah, and then how many people do you see that constantly are like, God, like I see this on Twitter every once in a while from big like blue check mark tweet account or Twitter accounts that are like, man, like and retweet if you miss the Obama years, and it gets like fucking 250,000 likes and however many retweets, and you're like, damn, like.
They're doing it about Bush, man. If you can like wax nostalgic about the Bush years, then like, dude, you got to realize nostalgia is a drug. Come on,
my
man.
Gosh. Ah!
How can you possibly argue that the Bush years were better than this?
Oh man.
Other than the fact that like the media and Twitter is just a cynical cesspool of sadness and debauchery.
Well, because
like,
I
that
think
part's worse.
A lot of people still think that going into Iraq, maybe they didn't have weapons of mass destruction, but it was still a good thing. We were like being the good police.
It was very well intentioned.
Yeah, exactly. We were the good
Anybody
police
who believes
officers.
that's just fooling themselves.
Saddam was, committing humanitarian crimes, and so that's why we went in there. And so I think people still think of the United States a lot of times as that like global police force. And to that I say, watch Team America, motherfuckers.
Did you read any of the Afghanistan papers that came out, the Washington Post last week?
No.
It's really good. I'll probably make it a segment on the show at some point in the future.
Were they just like budgetary stuff? Because I know that some of that stuff has been leaked out recently. Or is it more like actual cables about strategy and things like that?
Yeah, it's all these interviews that the DoD and Pentagon did throughout like 2012 through like 16, something like that. I can't remember. People who were working in both the Bush and the Obama years in Afghanistan, basically admitting that everything they sold to the public was a lie and that they never had any idea what they were doing there, and it was a failure from the beginning.
Jesus.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible read.
Jesus. Okay.
That's how I spent my first couple days this semester, reading the goddamn Afghanistan papers.
Nice, man. All right. Last question, yeah? Each?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. If you could go back and do this decade over again, is there anything you've given up or disbelieved or forgotten or ignored that you wish you could get back?
Yeah, so what was interesting is all those hyphenated terms, the verbs given up, disbelieved, forgotten, ignored, are not intentionally equivalent.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of options here.
Yeah.
One option I thought of was like a classic one, like invest more time and effort in friendships. I feel like our decision to do the podcast was such a great thing, regardless is not a word, regardless of whether or not we actually had any success at it, right? Just because it meant we get to have our conversations every week that we have to infrequently otherwise. So that was enough in and of itself. But I haven't been able to dedicate that kind of time to some of my other closest friendships, and that makes me kind of sad. Another option, but everyone says that, so that's a universal thing, I think, nowadays. Another one I thought of was maybe like, it was interesting. I just got this notification on Twitter that I had my Twitter 10-year anniversary this week. I was like, fuck me, dude. This entire decade, oh my God, I've had Twitter infecting my brain. I probably shouldn't have done that. I made a horrible decision 10 years ago this week. But really, honestly, the one that I think is maybe a little bit more unique, but I really feel some regret over, or maybe regret's not the right word, but just something I wish I had dedicated more time to is to playing music and playing guitar. I have these guitars. They're sitting right next to me in the office while I'm recording this podcast, and I just rarely pick them up. And they brought me so much joy in high school and in college years. And I dedicated myself to so much, and I played in bands, and it was one of the, some of the best experiences of my life came from just fooling around on guitar and playing with people. And it's just not a thing that I do anymore very much. And occasionally I pick it up and I'll record a cover song for like a family member or a friend or something. But I don't do it regularly, and I don't keep up with it, and I lose my abilities over time. They become, calcified, and that bums me out. I wish I really had more time to dedicate to that and more infrastructure in place to sort of, motivate me to do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that, man. I get that. I mean, because part of it is time, and then we can say, "Oh, we don't have time," and that's partly true, but it's also partly true that we give ourselves to other activities, right?
Yeah.
And I wonder if I'm giving myself to that hour that I watched, I don't know, Stephen A. Smith rant about fucking the Cowboys or whatever. Like, could I not have played the guitar? Or could I not have been singing? Because, I love to sing. Could I not have done something like that brings me immense joy, and that could be a habit that I could continue to cultivate? But I don't, Yeah.
Yeah, you really got to have that infrastructure of motivation. It's got to be there, I think, to really make it happen. It's really difficult when you've got other things going on to become, intrinsically motivated.
Yeah, that's why if you have a band or if you are part of, like this is for some reason this is the only thing I could think of, but like if you're part of the church worship team, right?
Yeah, dude, that was it. I mean, it was bad music. It was bad music. But I was a part of so many different worship teams, and that keeps you going, man.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the weird thing is even though it's bad music and it keeps you going, it actually inspires you and motivates you to like play music with other people and outside of that, just because you're already doing it,
It's such a good thing to play music with people, man. It's like a spiritually uplifting thing.
Totally is.
It's meaningful.
Totally is. Well, you can be the lead. You can be the worship leader at my home church in 10 years.
Yeah, dude. Can we do a little bit of metal?
Fucking A Crowbar, man. Some Lamb of God. Wait, no, Lamb of God aren't Christian. What's
Striper, dude? Let's do some Striper.
Well, yeah, no, there's a fucking like heavy metal, like black metal Christian band. What were they called? Stavesaker?
Oh, well, they weren't metal, but yeah.
Oh, I don't even remember who they were. I just remember seeing like the T-shirts and shit. What were they?
They were like Crucified. One of the guys was Crucified before then, which is a thrash metal band. They were great.
Really? Okay.
Oh, yeah. And there's like, remember Demon Hunter? They were like a new metal band.
No, I do not remember that.
Oh my God. Go back and listen to Demon Hunter. They were like an awful new metal band in the mid 2000s that was on like Tooth and Nail or Solid State or one of those Christian labels. Oh man, so good.
Oh man, yeah, my buddy's band was on Tooth and Nail, Project 86.
Oh yeah, fucking I loved Project 86, man. I saw them live.
Yeah, Randy, the guitarist Randy's a buddy of mine. He actually produced one of my old bands, one of our old songs, but he's they were fucking I was like obsessed with them for about 10 years.
Oh yeah, dude, they were great.
So good. And the lead singer, Schwab, he's actually
Andrew
like
Schwab, yeah.
Yeah, his lyrics are like super clever and introspective. Like even now I think I would find value. I didn't get them when I was a young Christian because they were actually like existential lyrics,
There's like doubt in here, man. This is bad.
Yeah, totally, dude. And like, actually, have you read any of his poetry or anything like that?
Oh yeah, I was huge into them.
Okay, yeah. So like, it's like legit shit. Like when I was at Masters, I kind of got into that a little bit. So yeah, man. Anyway.
That's a blast from the past, dude. Damn.
Fuck. Yeah, dude.
All right, last one for you. If you could go back and change one thing about the last decade, what would it be? And no cheating by saying you don't have regrets because you're Austin. Just as far as you're concerned, what would you change about the last decade?
No, here's the thing, man. I like that you put the parenthetical, but there are a lot of things that I would change.
Okay.
A ton of things. But I'm going to surprise you with one. I think this is one I think about a lot, and I don't know how serious, because of course I'm going to do the thing where it's like, but every experience that I've had has led me here. Of course that is true. But I think about this all the time. Where would my life be if rather than move to England and go to Nottingham for my master's degree, I would have done my master's degree at Duke? Because
you've mentioned this before, I remember.
I got accepted and I wanted to go, but it was a little bit more expensive, actually quite a bit more expensive. But I have thought about this a lot. And I wonder, because Duke is a top 10, top 15 university academically. We'll say top 20 at least academically. And it's a fast track to like Ivy Leagues. So I have a feeling, had I gone to Duke, I probably would have gone to maybe like either like stayed at Duke to do like a PhD or gone to like one of the Ivies to do a PhD, right?
What do you think it would have been in? Because you would have been doing like religious studies and theology from like a more liberal theology perspective at Duke.
I think about that a lot too. I don't know, but like people like J. Cameron Carter are at Duke. So,
it's like critical race theory.
Critical race theory stuff. Yeah, I think. And then there's like Hauerwas, but then someone like Dan Barber went to Duke. And so like his work is all weird and Deleuzian, but also like Yoderian at the same time. So you're like, what the fuck? He'll like quote Assad, Talal Assad, he'll quote Yoder, and then he'll quote Deleuze all in the same fucking paragraph.
And then like, Pope Gregory, yeah.
Yeah, it's like, what the fuck is going on here? So, I mean, it could have been something like syncretistic like that. Or I might have like stayed more theologically adjacent than moved straight into philosophy and done like religious studies or like maybe gone on to like Princeton Seminary or some shit like that. Like, could you imagine?
Oh, God.
But like it could have been something like that, but I don't know. But I do feel like I do wonder that quite a bit. And even though I don't think I would like to fully just be an academic theologian or an academic like religious studies scholar, I do like wish I could take that timeline,
Do you think if you hadn't worked with Philip Goodchild that you would have the current interest in financialization and stuff like that you have now?
It is so funny, dude, because I'm coming back to him now. So, like, I still think that Theology of Money and Capitalism and Religion are two of the most important books that I read in my life. And I think that they're two of the most underrated books in critical theory. Like, even Martin Konings like cites him. I've talked with Martin quite a bit about Philip's work, and I'm trying to like re-engage with some of Philip's work because there's this new massive book that we talked about by Eugene McCare. So I think that there's this really interesting matrix of a lot of stuff that's going on in like let's say like critical investigations, like anti-capitalist or critiques of capitalism from various perspectives, from like Marxist, post-Marxist, Eugene McCare's romantic perspectives. And I think that Philip offers something so unique that a lot of these other individuals aren't looking at. And I think it really did like set a trajectory. It was weird. It was almost like it laid some seeds, but it just took almost 10 years for them to start to really blossom, Yeah,
it's pretty interesting. I like to think about those little moments that set you on a trajectory that stick with you for good, even if you don't realize it for a long time.
Yeah. Yeah, because I mean, I read this like collection of books, or collection of essays. I can't remember what it's called right now. It's called like, like social wealth and derivatives, or the social wealth of derivatives, or like derivatives and social wealth, and it's edited by like Randy Martin, and it's got essays by Eli Ayash and Arjun Appadurai and various other figures. But anyway, when I'm reading through a lot of these essays, I'm like, man, these people would benefit so much if they engaged with Philip's work a little bit,
Yeah.
So I am kind of excited in that sense to kind of like maybe like introduce him to some of these theorists that are doing like critical work on derivatives and financial speculation in the critical finance literature. So that's kind of cool. But nevertheless, I wonder if I would have taken that alternate timeline all the time, if I would have gone to Duke, what would have happened?
Yeah, dude. I want to see that historical fiction.
Yeah, me too, man. Yeah. Oh, that was it?
That's it, dude. Yeah.
Oh, we're done. Oh, sweet.
That's it.
Well, sweet, man. I'm actually sweating. It is warm in my room right now.
What is it, like 1 o'clock in the morning? 2 o'clock in the morning?
It's coming up on 2 o'clock.
Holy shit.
Yeah, dude. So, well, Happy New Year. Happy New Decade. Even though these designations are arbitrary bullshit that are still a part of this weird calendar that was part of my shitty minute a while ago that is Common Era, but they're still using the same fucking dates as the old Christian calendar. Weird shit. Happy New Year anyway. And happy decade anyway.
That was your weirdest shitty minute of all time, I'm pretty sure.
I was just in a grumpy mood, I think. I don't know what I was saying. But yeah, man. As we end the year, I guess I could say thank you for another wonderful year to you, Troy, and also to the listeners. I really do love this podcast, man. It is great. It is that institutional framework that kind of like forces me to. It forces our friendship, but also it like really does challenge me in a lot of in really like intellectual and personal ways. So I look forward to the next year too.
Ditto, man. I'm excited about it. We got some cool things on the horizon.
Yes, we do. So, thank you, motherfuckers, for listening. Don't think we have anything to say? Go to engineswim.com, get your athletic gear, swimming gear, etc., etc. Owls at checkout, you get 20% off. Patreon.com/owlsatdawn, get access to bonus content, all that other good shit. And I think that's pretty much the last thing that we got to say in the year 2019, unless there's anything you got to say. Send us out.
There's just one more thing I can think of for this decade.
What's that, dude?
Das Vidania, 2010s.